So, dear guest speakers, dear all, good morning. Firstly, apologies for the small delay. It is with great pleasure, however, that we welcome you here to today's debate organized by the NGO Support Center through our project EU Impact, From Citizen Involvement to Policy Impact. It's a project funded by the European Union, and it basically gathers citizens' views and input on various fields of EU policy. I would firstly like to thank our speakers, all of our speakers, for being here today, the moderator, and all of you, of course, for accepting our invitation, taking the time to be here, and I would really like to encourage you to take part in the discussion that will follow. Today's event sets out to explore the relationship and engagement between the EU and civil society, the two-way influence that derives from this relationship and the way they affect one another. As NGO Support Center, we really believe that civil society organizations in Cyprus and abroad, through their multi-level work, have been a pivotal agent in the transformation of the EU. Civil society, in the form of established civil society organizations or citizens' initiatives, is working to bridge the gap between the EU institutions and the citizens, often acting as a watchdog or as an agent for the promotion of change and policies, aiming to safeguard human rights and improve the lives of EU citizens. Civil society can play a key role in increasing transparency and reducing the so-called democratic deficit within the EU. Also, it is important to note that CSOs use EU policies and regulations to push for change at the national level. At the same time, the EU has provided structural and financial support to CSOs and has incorporated them to the decision-making process, making a considerable contribution to the overall development of the sector in the past 20 years. We do believe, however, that CSOs themselves should provide feedback and contribute to the discussion regarding the efficiency of the various EU funding mechanisms and programs, and not only act as grant recipients. Additionally, the EU has influenced the modus operandi of CSOs and supported the creation and maintenance of European networks, encouraging CSOs to work at both national and EU level. Networks allow organizations to exchange views and best practices in the relevant fields, as well as coordinate action and advocacy in their home countries and towards the EU. Examples of Cypriot CSOs, members of European networks, include, for instance, CINDEP, which is a member of Concord, the European Confederation for Relief and Development, the Cyprus Youth Council, a member of the European Youth Forum, and KISA, member of the European Network Against Racism, among many others. Clearly, we have a long way to go in order to establish an institutional framework through which CSOs and citizens can effectively and consistently influence the political systems of EU and member states. The sector has many organizational issues to address, both at the national level, especially in Cyprus, where local CSOs have been working on the relevant law reform for almost 10 years now, but also at the EU level, with networks often working on a two-tier basis, as member CSOs are different in terms of size, resources, and may face obstacles such as the geographical distance from decision-making centers, something that Cypriot organizations know quite well. We should also note that CSOs do not have the means to compete the thousands of private sector lobbyists who work in Brussels and seek to affect legislation. We do remain positive, though, that civil society should work closely with EU institutions to maintain a key role in the political system of the EU and in policy making in member states and at the EU level. I would now like to pass the floor to Anna to introduce our speakers. I'm sure that they have many interesting insights to share. And again, I would like to encourage you to participate actively in the discussion, sharing your own experiences. Thank you.
Good morning. Welcome to the public debate on citizen participation organized by the NGO Support Center through the project EU Impact in order to explore ways in which citizens and civil society organizations can participate actively in the European Union and influence the policy-making process. My name is Anna Dalosi. I'm the Executive Director of the Cyprus Youth Clubs Organization, a youth organization consisting of 105 youth clubs in the Republic of Cyprus. We have gathered here today representatives of citizen initiatives and civil society organizations in order not only to listen to our notable keynote speakers, but also to present their experiences and recommendations on how to improve the cooperation between civil society and the European institutions. We will have the opportunity to be presented with specific initiatives and to discuss further opportunities for citizen participation. The debate is split into two panel discussions. The first one is European Union's engagement with civil society, and the second one is civil society work at the European level. On behalf of the NGO Support Center, I would like to welcome the keynote speakers of the first part of the discussion. Mr. Georgios Markoropoulotis, Head of the European Commission Representation in Cyprus, Mr. Kostas Mavridis, Member of the European Parliament, representing the Progressive Alliance of Socialists and Democrats in the European Parliament, and Mr. Odysseas Christou, Assistant Professor in Government, International Law and International Relations in the Department of Law of the University of Nicosia. All our speakers will be happy to receive questions from the audience at the end of all three presentations. Please feel free to pose your questions even in Greek, and we will help you with the translation, if you feel so. Your input is very important for the NGO Support Center, because the Center is planning to share your recommendations with relevant stakeholders, not only in Cyprus, but also within the network of their 8 partners in the project U Impact. I now give the floor to Mr. Markoropoulotis.
Thank you very much, Anna. Dear Member of the European Parliament, dear Mr. Mavridis, dear Professor Christou, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure for me to be here today and represent the European Commission at this important discussion. I will, in the time allotted to me, trying to give some food for thought, both to the panel and for further questions, if there are any. I would like to give you the perspective from the European Commission's point of view on the European Union's engagement with civil society. To achieve political progress in a modern democratic society, it is vital to have the support of active and committed citizens and their organizations. With the growth of globalization, power can seem to be more and more distant from individuals. So enabling people at the grassroots to take an active role in policy shaping and decision-making is key to the democratic legitimacy of public institutions and their work. Policies will be more successful if they're based on consensus and work in the general interest. The current challenges which are facing the EU and their growing complexity mean that the dialogue with civil society organizations is more important than ever. The experience and specialized knowledge they embody can make political decision-making better and more credible. This helps the wider public to understand and engage with decisions and therefore to implement them more effectively. Indeed, civil society organizations represent a unique link between citizens and government, helping to make the voices of citizens heard and encouraging people's active participation in the political process. In addition, think tanks and policy research organizations are invaluable in providing visions for the future, as well as generating ideas and recommendations on how to approach complex issues, such as the EU policies in some cases, active European citizenship, identity and values. It goes without saying that civil society organizations represent a major opportunity to involve citizens or to represent their interests at the European debate. One way to build enduring links across the EU is to assist these organizations in cooperating on common issues at the EU level. The European Commission supports concrete joint projects between civil society organizations from different participating countries, whether they work at regional, national, or European level. These projects should address issues of European interest and focus on putting forward concrete solutions through cross-border cooperation or coordination. To this end, we have created the Europe for Citizens program, and in its implementation, civil society organizations are very important partners for us. What is the aim of the program? The program aims to contribute to citizens' understanding of the EU, its history and diversity, to foster European citizenship and improve conditions for civic and democratic participation at the EU level, to raise awareness of remembrance, common history and values, and finally, to encourage democratic participation of citizens at the EU level by developing citizens' understanding of the EU policy-making process and by promoting opportunities for societal and intercultural engagement and volunteering at EU level. Though it is relatively modest in budget terms, the Europe for Citizens program is very substantial in content terms. It supports activities that cover Europe-wide civic participation and actions which have long-standing effects. It offers funding for European projects and initiatives that foster mutual understanding, historic memory, intercultural dialogue, solidarity, societal engagement, and volunteering at the European level. Let me just give you an example from last year. In France, the project entitled Success consisted in setting up a network of young citizens coming from different cultural, social, and national backgrounds, living in several popular, multicultural, disadvantaged neighborhoods, difficult neighborhoods, and major European cities, to contribute to the reversal of populist, racist, and xenophobic attitude in Europe, and to promote the founding values of European citizenship. In that context, reflection was carried out, notably on civil participation of EU citizens and immigrants in the political and civic life, multiculturalism, mass media, and transparency of institutions. Looking at the bigger picture, in 2014, the Europe for Citizens program co-financed 412 projects from 31 participating countries involving more than 1 million citizens. These projects took the form of town twinning activities, networks of towns, civil society projects, and projects on European remembrance, as well as operating grants to European civil society organizations that are active in the thematic areas targeted by the program. More importantly, these projects are run by people who dedicate their lives in active citizen participation. Through this work, citizens are actively developing the European idea. They promote the value of participating and acting together to build a better Europe. The Europe for Citizens program for the period 2014 to 2020 is indeed an important instrument that encourages citizens to play a stronger role in the development of the EU. Through projects and activities in which citizens who are already active within organizations or institutions, as well as citizens who are not yet involved, can participate and can make their voice heard. The Europe for Citizens program is promoting Europe's shared history and values, and fostering, as I said, EU citizenship and citizens' responsible democratic civic participation. Let me now turn to another powerful tool we have created at the European level to empower citizens and civil society and to involve them in the decision-making process, which is, no doubt you will have heard about it, the ECI, the European Citizens Initiative, which was launched in April 2012 as an agenda-setting tool in the hands of citizens. An ECI, European Citizens Initiative, allows, and I think the member of the European Parliament is well aware of this initiative and its importance, allows 1 million citizens from at least 1/4 of EU member states to invite, I put the invite in quotation marks because it is more like a request than an invitation only, the European Commission to take action in areas where the Commission has the power to do so. Over the past 3 years, citizens have been indeed employing this tool that promotes active participation. An estimated 6 million Europeans have supported European citizens' initiatives and used their voice to bring important causes directly to the ears of European policymakers. The fact that 2 citizens' initiatives have gone through the full process shows that the regulation establishing the European Citizen Initiatives has been fully implemented. However, there have been situations where some citizens were not able to support initiatives due to the diverging member states' requirements. The Commission is involved in constructive discussions, the European Commission is involved in constructive discussions with the member states concerned to address these issues and has adopted measures to facilitate a resolution. The ECI has contributed in a small way to the start of what I think it's fair to say is the first real pan-European debate between citizens. Social media, of course, has made it easier than ever before for citizens from the four corners of Europe to share their thoughts, concerns, their hopes, their ideals. So it is very important at a time when we observe a clear development towards deepening EU integration, notably in the economic domain, at a time when the European Commission gets new powers to comment on budgets or to issue detailed country-specific recommendations on childcare, for instance, in the context of our economic semester, it is evident that there will be stronger and louder calls from citizens to have a say in this democratic process in order to be heard, in order to participate, in order to form a transnational democratic process of debates. On top of it, it is clear that the Facebook and Twitter generation will wish to do it via the internet, via electronic means and social media. And with the European Citizens Initiative, citizens for the first time have a real chance to turn these hopes and concerns into something more concrete, to get them firmly onto the European agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, our history shows that civil society has played a major role in democratic development. The most prosperous functioning democracies are those where civil society can thrive, where every group can have its voice heard, and where civil society can freely monitor government activities. An active and vibrant civil society acts as a bridge between people and their authorities. That is exactly the civil society we want in the European Union, and the European Commission is committed in working with civil society to address the main challenges facing us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Good morning, everyone. I need to apologize because it was mainly due to me for being late today. I had a meeting last night in Paphos, and I had to come all the way. Now, first of all, I'd like to congratulate the organizers for this event, and also I'd like to welcome everyone, especially those who came from abroad. Now, from me, what you would expect to see is the case of the participation of European citizens from the point of view of the European Parliament, or for that matter, from the point of view of 1 out of 751 MEPs. So in the European Parliament, we are 751 members of the European Parliament. And given that at least one of the tools available to the European citizens has already been presented in a very nice way, I'm referring to the European Citizens Initiative, I would rather concentrate on some other tools and some other aspects that are available to the European citizen, especially those that are related to the European Parliament. Usually, when we discuss such matters, I start with something which is very well known. I knew it before becoming a member of the European Parliament, but it's one thing to know it theoretically and another thing to live through it. Where the power in the European Union is shared mainly by 3 institutions. The European Council, the heads of states, the European Commission, Mr. Juncker and his commissioners, and finally the European Parliament. Surprisingly or not, from these 3 main institutions, the only one which has officials being directly voted, democratically elected by the people of Europe by the citizens of Europe, it's the European Parliament. All the other European officials are appointed. It's as simple as that. So making the case for the European Parliament, I would say that it might sound being an exaggeration, but we are the European Parliament, the 751 members of the European Parliament, are the only ones which have full democratic legitimization in their saying and their action. Having said that, it is also true that the last few years, or I would say the last few decades, we've seen a change in the sharing of power. More and more competences and more power slowly but steadily is shifted from other institutions towards the European Parliament. And I could give you real examples of that. For example, the European Union budget has to go through the European Parliament. We have more involvement as the only ones democratically elected, more involvement in the appointment of European officials, more say in the European other institutions, and so on. And the hope and the wish is that this process will continue because, again, we need democratic legitimization within the European Union. And given that we are the only ones being democratically elected, basically we might say that we are responsible back to the European citizen. That's why the European citizens have an access in us, a direct access. And I will give you some insights of how a member of the European Parliament can act and intervene in a political way in the European level, always having in mind the will and the wishes of the European citizens, the civic society. First of all, a member of the European Parliament can participate and intervene actively in the plenary session, of course, in the group in which each one of us participates. For example, myself, I am part of the Progressive Alliance of Socialists and Democrats, the second largest political group in the European Parliament. The first one is EPP, the EPP, and there are other groups as well. So besides the plenary, we participate in our political groups, but then as members of the European Parliament, we may participate, we choose to participate in different committees and different delegations. Let's take the example of myself. I am a member of the committee which is called the Econ Committee. It's an abbreviation, it's an acronym for the Committee for Monetary and Economic Affairs. There are many other different committees. One of them, which I will refer to, I will describe in a few minutes, it's the Committee of Petitions, which has to do with the citizens' rights and provides a process for any citizen and any group of citizens to bring up a subject to the European Parliament. Let's go back to the different committees and the different delegations. Each member of the European Parliament, through its group, political group, can participate in those committees and delegations. And I will give you an example to the question that I had in my mind when I was first elected. I'm almost a year and a half in my term now. Can a member of the Parliament make a difference? Well, I will be quite honest to you. The rule is that it's not easy for one, but you might have exceptions. That's why you have to strong alliances with different groups of parliamentaries, members, but also you have to be convincing enough to support your views and arguments. And a good example of that, which has to do with Cyprus as well, it's one which, from the very beginning, I strongly supported. And I would be, the example has to do with the Econ Committee, with the Economic Committee. You see, the one problem that we have in the European Union is the fact that the European Union demands from each member state to guarantee its own bank deposits, which implies that a bank in Cyprus, given the weaknesses of the state of Cyprus, the government of Cyprus has, even today, to guarantee up to 100,000 per depositor for each private bank that deposits. Now, make that comparison in a country like Germany, where the government of Germany, the strong, healthy, and sound government of Germany, has to guarantee the deposits of their own banks. There would be no surprise. A bank in Cyprus, of course, it's in a disadvantage when it comes to competition with a bank, a private bank in Germany. Why? The deposits in Cyprus are being guaranteed by the government of Cyprus, while the deposits in Germany are guaranteed by the German government. So this creates a non-level playing field. From the very beginning, I was arguing about this, that this is an indirect discrimination. Well, first of all, I built up alliances within my own group, with one from Portugal, a very well-known in the Parliament, in the Econ Committee, colleague of mine, Elisa Ferreira. And both of us actively participated in interventions and arguments towards our colleagues and towards the European institutions. Well, after a year and a half, I might say to you that a few weeks ago, the president of the European Central Bank, in the context of a monetary dialogue, adopted our view. And we expect that before the end of this year, the European Commission will come up with the first document regarding a European depository guarantee scheme, the details of which, of course, are going to be discussed and revealed in the future. But at least we have the first step towards this very important process and initiative. Now, what else? The citizens can also submit complaints or concerns either to us, to the members of the European Parliament, or to a special committee which is called the Committee of Petitions. This committee, it's just like any other committee in the European Parliament, which has the competence of accepting complaints from either European citizens group or citizens individually. An example of this, received by this committee very recently, was by the group of citizens in Spain, which they felt that their rights have been violated by the banks. So again, it has to do with economics. And to make the whole example very simple, I would say that this citizens group in Spain had the argument that their rights, even though protected by directives of the European Union protecting citizens against unfair terms and practices of banks. For example, it is my strong view, by the way, that even in Cyprus, banks are violating in a very blatant way this specific directive. Again, going back to Spain, the complaint of the citizens was brought in front of the Committee of Petitions. And it went through all the process, and finally, it came up to the plenary of the European Parliament, where we have the full discussion, and we had a report which was voted and discussed in a very detailed way. And even though the Committee of Affairs, the Committee of Petitions, does not have a legal binding decision, though the subject matter is being now discussed publicly, and hopefully with the involvement of the Commission and the involvement of other European institutions, this problem might come to an end with a more alignment of the European citizens with the European directives protecting the rights of the European citizens. Finally, I will give you another example that has to do with the values and principles of the European citizens, and how a member of the European Parliament can actively participate in this process. Each one of us, when it comes to a report, we can have the role of a rapporteur, as it is called, which is the member of the European Parliament in charge of a specific report, and each political group has its own shadow rapporteur. So this rapporteur and the shadow rapporteurs are the ones who discuss first among them a report. And finally, the report, after it goes through a discussion in the committee, it's been driven in the plenary session for approval or disapproval. Talking about Cyprus, speaking about Cyprus, I will say a few things about the values and principles of the European Union. Usually, many of us, regardless, and I'm referring to all of us from Cyprus, the MEPs, we have, of course, and it is understandable, a very strong active participation when it comes to issues about Turkey. And as you know, just a few kilometers from here, we have a part of Cyprus which is not controlled by the government of Cyprus due to the illegal occupation of Turkey. This matter, as many others, I think that they are fully discussed and presented, and the members of the European Parliament are aware of this because the participation of the members of the European Parliament, listening to the voices of the citizens, are being brought in the European Parliament. And if I have to make a wish for the future or a critique for the future, I would say that what I realize is that, and I'm going to end up with this, is that the European Union is a political organization with different interests. And of course, these interests sometimes between different nations are different in nature and sometimes even conflicting. That's why you have to build up on our European identity in order to align our interests. And given that we are not the United States, neither Russia nor China, meaning we don't have military power, our strength lies basically on our values and principles. And that's why I think that the values and principles of the European Union have to be always our major concern, because it is also our interests. Without them, the European Union will never exist. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mavridis. Thank you.